Welcome to Books in the Biz, a podcast that looks at both the financial and operational sides of success. Please welcome our hosts, Dan Paulson and Richard Veltre. Dan is the CEO of Envision Development International, and he works with leaders to increase sales and profits through great cultures with solid operations. Rich is CEO of the Veltre Group and a financial strategist working with companies to manage their money more effectively. Now on to the podcast.
Thank you, Alice. She was in, she was out. She was in, she was out.
She's awesome.
She is awesome. Rich, how are you doing?
I'm good, Dan. How about you?
Oh, pretty good. Another exciting episode of Books in the Biz. We're
Always.
holding you on the edge of your seat as we talk about microchips. Exciting stuff.
It is exciting stuff. It's huge. Although it's really small.
It's really, really small and really expensive.
Yeah.
But this is what prompted our discussion today. Rich, you found this article.
Yep.
What did you find interesting about it?
I think the big question mark, do I think it's a good move? Sure. Should the government be putting money towards bringing stuff back home? Sure. I can't put a bad red flag at the end of that. Having things here, all the buzzwords were in there. Manufacturing within the United States border, national security, supply chain, all of these things were in the article, and you start to say, makes sense, makes a lot of sense. The hiccup, I think, from me reading it goes back to all the podcasts we've probably had in the last year that all said, we're talking about culture, we're talking about people, we're talking about training, we're talking about who has the skill set, and there's nothing in the article about any of that.
No.
So that's where I kind of read the article and said, okay, very interesting, and I can see both sides. I can see good and I can see evil. So
you are the soothsayer who is.
Yeah, I mean, I can see all, like I said, I can see all the good. I can see creating jobs. I can see creating jobs. I just don't know if they'll be fully filled. And if these are state of the art semiconductor, fabricating plants, how much of it's going to be robotic, and it's not really going to add that many jobs because it's going to be somebody who's got an advanced education in robotics or in, because these are manufacturing processes that I'm sure I don't know. I deal with numbers, not with how to build a microchip, right? So, so I think there's a little bit of a skepticism there, and then there's always the skepticism of, where are these things being built?
Yeah.
Where are we getting these plants? Suddenly, I think half of them are in Arizona. So that doesn't raise flags of, why did it get to Arizona? So,
right. Well, I think there's also a plant being built it's either Indiana or Ohio. Intel's building one up there. Like you, I see potential good that could come out of this. With the government, though, I don't see a lot. There's a lot of people out there that can complain about crony capitalism. Mm-hmm. And to me, in some ways, this is the government, again, kind of choosing, in some cases, winners, losers. And I don't know. Like you said, the people are going to be hired are mostly skilled labor. And highly skilled labor at that. So it's going to be people that have degrees upon degrees who understand all this stuff. Now, funny enough, I have toured a microchip plant. When I was doing some stuff over in China, I actually got to walk through one and see all the stuff that's going on. Now, Chinese at the time, they had a lot of people working these plants, but there was a lot of robotics along with it too. Mm-hmm. It does require a lot of technology to produce these things, and they've gotten even more advanced in the time that I was touring that plant till now. Right. But when you start throwing billions of dollars at stuff, the things that always pop into my head is, okay, where are these billions coming from? Mm-hmm. The obvious answer is out of our pocket. So our taxes are basically paying for that subsidy. And will it lead to the result that they promise? And I have yet to see a situation where the government's promises have never really, have ever really reached their full potential of what they said they were going to do. in most cases, it tends to create more problems. Now, should we have, production over here? Most definitely. I think if there's one thing we've learned over the last couple of years, isolating production of especially critical components to a lot of things, such as microchips are, in one area of the world that is also potentially volatile, isn't always a good thing. Mm-hmm. Is this the best way to bring jobs back? It's going to bring a few, but I don't think it's going to bring as many as they think it is. It's right. A huge investment to put up these plants. Not to mention they suck a lot of energy. We often forget about what's the cost of producing a microchip, and it's not cheap. I mean, there's a lot of electricity that goes into making those things little and working and all that good stuff.
Right.
So I find it really hard, and I pulled up the article here. Mm-hmm. And you look at it, $8.5 billion to Intel. I didn't look up Intel's profit margins from last year, but I don't think they needed that. I'm pretty sure they were okay. TSMC, I know less about. They got $6.6 billion. Micron, $6.1 billion. Samsung, $6.4 billion, and Samsung isn't even a U.S. company.
No, I saw that. That
so where's that money going?
That sparked a bit.
Yep. And then Global Foundries, that looks like a U.S. based company. I mean, three of the five that are in this graphic are U.S. based companies.
Well, the other one, here's the other rub before you change the scene, right?
Yeah.
The TSMC, I think we don't know a lot about it because I believe it's a Taiwanese company.
Yep.
So I don't think they're a U.S. company either, although it's Taiwan. So
well, Taiwan's a much closer ally than mainland China is.
True.
That's for sure. I believe Taiwan right now is the largest producer of microchips in the world. I could be wrong on that. If they're not the largest, they're pretty darn close. They're definitely one of the top ones. I think they're in South Korea are some of the bigger ones. China is, of course, catching up rapidly because they produce a lot of. They're getting more into advanced technology, so that's going to be a challenge. But
right.
To show this again, Intel has massive plans, massive now that they're getting $6 billion from the government. Right. They're receiving the largest share of the pie with $8.5 billion in grants, plus an additional $11 billion in government loans. Now, government loans are usually very low interest loans.
Yeah.
And on top of that, sometimes they're forgivable. So keep that in mind, folks.
Oh, yeah.
Here's where we go with things. The grants account for 22% of the Act's total subsidies for chip production. Intel is expected to invest $100 billion to construct plants in Arizona, Ohio, New Mexico, and Oregon. And this is also seeking the $25 billion in tax credits. Okay, so we're giving them $8 billion. We're adding on another $25 billion in tax credits. That $100 billion, I'm assuming, is coming out of that $100 billion. I don't think the $100 billion is in addition to.
Right.
That's a pretty good chunk of money that's coming, out of the government pockets.
Yeah. Which means
wouldn't we all like to get $1 billion or a couple $1 billion? I think we were talking before we got on here. I'm like, if government wants to give me $6 billion, I'll let them tax it at 50%. They can go ahead and have half of it back. I'll be fine with the other half. I'd be good.
Yeah, sure. I can work with that. I can turn it into something. I could probably build a semiconductor plant.
Probably could.
I probably
could. And that's Biden hikes tariffs to China-made EVs. While this wasn't directly related, I did find this interesting because of all the talks of tariffs over the number of years, and this does kind of relate to the semiconductor production as well because they're increasing tariffs on that. So they're trying to offset competition by significantly raising the cost of the materials that companies would be getting from China for this. So again, here we play this political game where we're subsidizing in one area, we're raising taxes higher in another area, hopefully to circumvent that competition from happening. And not so sure that's going to work out the way we wanted to either. I mean, there was a lot of talk when Trump was president about his tariffs and whether or not they actually worked.
Right.
You're the financial guy. You tell me, are tariffs a good thing or are they not? I'm sure you could probably sit on the fence again and say, well, it's good and it's bad, or it's good and it's evil. But I typically don't see a lot of promise for tariffs because, if anything, it slows down the evolution of products and services and technology and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
I don't necessarily think that tariffs are the answer. Um, first of all, tariffs, penalties, I never understood when a tariff or a penalty is put in, and that puts more of our money into the government's hands. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't go back to you. Like, you're the
Right.
person who suffered to cause them to be penalized, but then the government takes the money, and you go, how did that work? Um, so, I didn't, when Trump did it, I thought something had to be done because I think China was at a point that everything that I saw seemed to indicate China felt that they were invincible. And so they could do whatever they wanted. And up until Trump, I think nobody ever told them no. And when somebody finally said no, whether he said it in the right way or not, or whether his intentions were even the right answer, somebody said no, and China hiccuped. Like, they literally did, I think, see that there was a chance here that somebody might actually say, this is no good. Okay, because for 20 years, all we've done is ship all kinds of stuff over there, and then we got garbage back.
Right.
So we got garbage product. We're paying more money than we should have because we're getting it manufactured somewhere else. We should be getting a discount. We're not. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we said it a week or two ago. The United States consumer, is what, three quarters, two-thirds, somewhere in that range of our entire economy comes from people within the United States.
Right.
So somebody's got to make them happy. So tariffs don't really do that. Tariffs just create an opportunity for someone to say, well, we're going to work slower and we're going to increase prices in order to cover
Yep.
the tariff. So the government found a way to tax us without actually saying, hey, we're taxing you.
It's that whole pass-through thing. They talk
Yeah.
about trickle-down economics and how that doesn't work. Well, this is
Yes.
trickle-down taxation, and that works just fine.
Yeah.
I've been reading on some of these EVs that China is developing. They've got a $10,000 car EV. Now, I think it was made by BYD. I have ridden in BYD cars. They're the equivalent of the old Hyundai Accents that you bought back 20 years ago. I mean, they tend to be cheaply made. They look cheap. They're small, but they tend to be somewhat efficient. Now, the ones I rode in were all gas because that's EV wasn't a big thing at that time. I'm now dating myself, but still, if it's a $10,000 car and Biden's talking about putting a $100,000 tariff on it, it's a $20,000 car. And you might say, well, that's a lot, but go out and price a new car on the market today. How many cars are at $20,000? And I think you'll only find the one from BYD with the 100% tariff on it. So, here's, I guess, the theme of all this is, should the government be involved in business? Should they be able to pull the strings on, again, who's going to win, who's going to lose?
Right.
Typically we see when government makes investments, it's to protect large businesses, not to protect the little guy. And on top of it all, what they're doing forces us to evolve at a much slower rate. So instead of being competitive, we rely on things like tariffs and subsidies to make us, not make us grow at all.
Right.
Go backwards in time. And I can look at the agriculture industry because I grew up on a farm. I can look at the automotive industry from the early 70s to really the early 90s. They were backpedaling. They were going backwards because they couldn't keep up with Honda and Toyota and Subaru and all these other car companies that were making cheap, relatively reliable, and efficient vehicles. And we were still driving around in the big gas guzzling land yachts. So it really slows down the process. It's not helping us be more competitive on a world scale.
Yeah. The EV is definitely a big piece because it seems like that's the way that these cars operate. These new cars or whatever are all operating on kind of wrapping this together.
Mm-hmm.
The semiconductors, right? One of the reasons we couldn't get cars for a while was the fact that there were no chips.
Yep.
So the answer now is, okay, well, we're going to build plants that can make the chips. Well, number one, how long is it going to be for
I
you to
think
get
3
that
to
up and
5
running?
years is the estimate before we have a plant
Okay.
that's up and running.
So 3 to 5 years. In the meantime, you're not telling us anything about pricing being assisted. Okay. Because I know if I go buy a car, there's got to be, I don't know how many chips there are in the car actually running it. Whether it's gas or EV doesn't matter to me. Right. If I go
Yes.
look for a car today, it's got a number of chips in it. On top of the fact that if I go for a washer dryer, if I go for any other
Your
appliance, they all
toaster
have a
has more
chip.
technology in it than the first moon capsule.
Exactly. So the problem is when those people didn't have the chips and the cars went scarce, the prices of the cars went up. Did the price of the car come down since then? Now that there's chips available? No. Will they come down if we put 85 million billion trillion dollars worth of, because the number's not set yet. They're going
No.
to go back to them and say we don't have enough money,
Yep.
right? So this is going to go higher than what was in the original bill. And when they do that, they're going to indicate that, hey, guess what? Cars aren't available again because they're, we're not able to get the chips.
Mm-hmm.
So when they finally get the chips, are you telling me that the Fords and the car makers that are out there are going to lower the prices of cars? I've never seen them lower the
Nope.
price of a car. A truck that I went to look at, just a pickup truck, normal. Yeah, it was a little souped up because that's just me, right? But I went to look at it, and it was like $70,000.
You
It's
actually
up to
found a
90.
cheap one. You should buy that
It's
because
up
I
to
priced them out
90.
at $90,000 to $100,000, and
Yeah.
that's even moving beyond a half-ton pickup truck.
Well, yeah. I mean, it went to 90 some $1,000s now. You go look at the same truck, and I'm only talking about a year or two ago. You're talking a very short window ago. That car went up from 70 to 90.
Right.
So, how are you telling me that this goes into the macroeconomic plan for the American people? You know, I struggle. I struggle with that a lot. Because you're not giving me something that says to me I can put myself behind that. I'm full of skepticism and sarcasm. If
I
I could get that
appreciate
one out with
your skepticism and your sarcasm, and I just looked it up.
yeah,
So on average, you'll find anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 semiconductor chips in a typical vehicle.
1,000.
1,000 to 3,000,
Oh
depending
wow,
upon the vehicle. So when you
unreal.
factor all that into play, I mean, even 20 years ago, the number was probably less than half of that. You basically have a computer on four wheels. That's
Yeah,
really what it's come down to. And
yeah,
I will speak personally to that because I bought a car last year and it is a rolling computer. And if anything goes wrong with it, I'm not going to know how to fix it because it's all controlled by different computer components and microchips and everything else.
yeah,
Which then also means somebody else has to fix it for you. That requires a tech. Now we go back to, Jay Gunnan's discussion earlier this year where
yeah,
you're going to have basically a highly trained computer geek that also knows how to wrench on a car working on your vehicle, and they're going to be making several $100s an hour to do that. And
yep,
what are you going to do? You're going to pay them.
yeah. And then when you flip, you know, flip that conversation into the next conversation when you started talking about EVs. I haven't seen an EV that's actually cheap.
No,
Not here.
not here,
So I mean that's
because they
what
built those on a premium too.
the people who
So
are really interested in the saving gas, and they can't afford an EV.
mhm.
It's too expensive. So how you haven't cured that by building this? You haven't showed me how you're curing that by putting the chip
Mhm.
manufacturing plant here.
Yeah.
So
Well, to that point with the EVs, a lot of the success that's happening with EVs is the subsidies that are put on those as well.
mhm,
So whether it's Tesla or Ford or Chevy or any of these companies that are building electric vehicles right now, Everything from carbon tax credits to subsidizing, if you buy a car, you get $7,000 off of it from the government for a tax break. But you're still talking about a $60,000 to $100,000 vehicle in most cases. So where does that put you? It doesn't really, some people, I'm sure it helps plenty. But typically they're the people that could afford the $60,000 to $100,000 car anyway. It's not the guy that lives in an apartment that's making $30,000 to $40,000 a year that's going to go out and buy an EV at this point, let alone where is he going to plug the darn thing in at if he lives in an apartment. In most cases, that's not an option.
Well, that's the truth too. And then on top of that, then you get into the whole conversation about the infrastructure and can it handle everybody running around with an EV? Then you're going to have the subsidies that go into, hey, we have to help out the power company, because they need to revamp their grid so they can actually charge your EV. Come on.
So it's just a tangled web of government subsidies and tax breaks and loans and whatnot. I guess I'm not opposed to stuff like that when it's happening more on a micro level. For example, TIF districts. I think in a lot of cases, TIF districts are very helpful to promote new job growth and creation, attract businesses into the area. I will put an asterisk by that because it's not always as competitive as we think it would be. But it gives an opportunity maybe for some smaller or medium-sized businesses to gain some footing and grow on their own by just giving them a tax break on the land for 3 to 5 years before they start paying into it.
Right.
And the government also is looking at that too and looking at if it does create jobs, well, those people are going to live in the area. They're also going to pay back local state taxes. So there's something that they're recouping there fairly quickly when that plant comes online. But when you get to the federal level, there's a lot more that the feds can wheel than, say, a city or a county government can. Yeah. And that's where we run into problems where there's that push by bigger government to, again, kind of control the marketplace. And anytime they get involved, I think it really hurts capitalism. And then all these issues that people complain about, I don't care which side of the fence you sit on, this is what you get.
Yeah. I always refer to the federal government as somebody in a very narrow street trying to make a K-turn in a tractor trailer. That's what I feel like when I think about the government, because they have to plot stuff out and they never do. Mm-hmm. And then imagine the mess that they make when they make a knee-jerk reaction trying to do something quickly and they didn't plan for it. So, as it is, they operate on information that's 8 years old.
Yes, very true. Yeah. And the other part we're also dealing with is we have, I think, it's close to $35 trillion in national debt. That's got to get paid off. Right now, we're paying, over $1 trillion a year in interest alone.
Yeah.
So that's I think it's the second or third line item on the federal budget is interest repayment.
Yeah.
Well, if you're doing grants, you're giving companies money. Where's that money coming from again? That's coming from our taxes. That's coming from that deficit, and that just pushes it that much higher. So we're getting kind of a double and triple whammy, everything from inflation to increase our own personal taxes to, whatever else that happens with all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, when they're printing the money for themselves, that doesn't help. That raises an inflation, and then the Fed's trying to fight against that. So it's almost like, when you want to sit down and think about it, you really want your head to explode. Think about that fact, right? Think about the fact that one part of the government is actually printing the money that's creating inflation. And then there's another part of the government that's actually trying to raise interest rates to stop the inflation that's being created by the people printing the money. So, just somebody slap their right hand with their left hand and, maybe we can actually get something done. But
exactly. I mean, it's like a game of 3-card Monte. Find where the ace is or the jack. And instead of playing with 3 cards, though, you're playing with 10 and you're battling against an octopus because they're just moving that money all over the place, which, like you said, makes your head explode when you try to say, well, it's coming out of this pocket, it's going into that pocket, but it's not staying in that pocket, it's moving over to that pocket.
Yeah.
And it's just a shuffle game all the way around.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
Oh no, that's quite all right. It is quite funny.
It makes you laugh. It really does. It makes you laugh. So at least now, I'll laugh for now. Tomorrow I'll cry, but at least for today, I'm still
So,
laughing.
we're sitting here and we're griping about what's going on, which is fine. I'm not a big one to gripe, because if you're going to gripe, you better come up with solutions. And I'm not saying our solutions would be right, but Rich, from a financial guy standpoint, what would you say might be a better move than government involvement and subsidies to pick winners?
You know, it's a much longer conversation, I'm sure, but I am very, very big. I worked for a big firm. I've seen what other big firms do. I've seen what big companies do. I see how inefficient it gets at the very, very big level. My curiosity is, isn't there somewhere that you could come up with a way that the little guy or the middle guy, little guy's probably too small. That probably doesn't make any sense. So, but isn't there a way to incentivize the middle guy more than we already do? I mean, throwing $2,000 at somebody that's already making, 250 or $300,000 of profit, you know, that's not helping them. That's not
Right.
helping them come to another level of thinking that actually solves problems. At that level of income, they're just looking to feed their family and, you know, live through the life in the promised land that we all believe the United States is, you know. And don't get me wrong, I think it is. I don't have any desire to go live in another country. But I think that there should be more incentivized programs for the middle market, the people who are going to actually create the jobs, and not create the jobs so they can lay a whole bunch of people off, and then hire them back, and then lay them off again, and hire. I mean, it gets to be such a vicious cycle, that you start to wonder, do they ever get anything done? Um, so that's what I'm wondering. I'm always wondering if there's a better answer for an incentive for the middle market, because I think they'll just flat out surprise you. I think they'll come up with a solution that fixes a lot of things, and you're not giving them the shot.
That is a good point, and I do agree with you on that. I think if you're going to put money anywhere, if you have to, put it in the small to medium sized companies, or at the very least, work on funding, maybe promising startups. Now, startups are of course very risky, but you point out, a lot of these smaller businesses that they're not going to grow to be like an Intel or something. But you look at HP and you look at Amazon, and all those companies pretty much started in a garage at one point.
Yeah.
Timing is everything, though. I think each one came along at its own right time. What's better to me is business owners working together to collectively figure out what is the timing of the market for what type of product. Is it AI now, for example? I think
Right.
we've talked about that. There's some things where that's going to be helpful. There's other things where I think it's more hype than anything else. But if it's manufacturing like this, are there more efficient ways to manufacture that we can do it on small scale here and then ramp up that scale over time? I mean, it's going to take time to build a chip plant anyway.
Mhm.
Why not invest in somebody who has a better idea on how to do it, even if it's fully automated?
Right.
I think we also have to look at our strengths as a country, as from all the way down to the city level or county level, and figure out where can we be competitive, and we should focus on that. We have endless resources here. We have right now a shortage of talent, but there is good talent out there that is trying to solve these problems, and I would rather see investments in areas that show promise than just giving it to a big organization, and then we'll complain 5 years from now when chip prices have tripled because cost of labor is so much higher here, and it really hasn't trickled down to us. So each side has its own version of trickle down economics. One's just more involved in the government and taxation side, but that's neither here nor there at this point.
Right.
So that's what I see. I think there's plenty of opportunity out there. It just, when you get the government involved, it makes it harder for the smaller and medium guys to compete.
Yeah. Totally agree.
But if you are a company that's looking for some competition or to get ahead in your market, Rich, you are the expert financial guru of all time. How should they get a hold of you if they need to get their finances in check and build financial strategies to help them expand when the government's not going to give them $6 billion?
The quick email is always the best way to make an intro, and we can have a quick conversation. It's rveltry@veltrygroup.com.
Thank you. And for me, just go to danpaulsonletsgo.com, where Rich will fix the finances. I'll work on the operational side, and maybe we can lower some of your costs and increase your profits that way. So, Rich, it's always been fun. And we got a special guest next week, which I will be sending out an announcement very soon. But thanks again, and we will talk to you later.
All right, everybody, take care.
All right, bye.